Now let's take a look at seeing the triangles and n-gons that we have in our meshes, and then some of the ways that we can deal with those when we do have them. So let's jump in here and just have a sphere loaded up. So any kind of mesh that you're working with, piece of geometry, you're going to go through the process of building that up and tweaking the topology. And then at some point you may want to check and see, do I have any triangles? How many of those do I have? And then you can decide, make the decision if you want to keep those, if those are something that you can get rid of. Same thing with n-gons. Okay. And so typically depending on the workflow that you're using, triangles may be something that you just want to minimize. They're okay, but maybe just put them in areas that aren't going to deform. Typically, n-gons will probably be something that you won't want to have. Again, that all goes back to your individual pipeline. Okay, I can just give you kind of some general guidelines based on my experience, but you do need to know your individual needs. If you're working on your own, it's good to just kind of practice working in mostly quads. If you're working in games, that's something different where you can maybe use some triangles. It's all going to end up triangles once it's tessellated. And so, again, those are all different situations. But to actually check and see, what we have going on in whatever model we're working on, we can choose our polygon object, and then we just want to go up to Mesh and go down to Cleanup. And here we can have some options for actually cleaning up the matching polygons. We just want to actually select them. We want to apply it to selected objects, and then Fix by Tessellation, we can actually choose, do we want to select n-gons or just quads? Okay, we'll concentrate on these two. So let's say that I want to find any n-gons that we have, so anything that has more than 4 sides to it. So we'll say faces with more than 4 sides, and we'll go ahead and clean up. Now, it doesn't look like anything has happened from this point, but if we go into our wireframe, we can see that we actually do have something selected. Okay, so oftentimes what I'll do is right after a cleanup, I'll just hit F, and that'll actually frame on whatever n-gons that we have selected. So it's showing us we actually do have one n-gon on the bottom. Okay, now if we want to find triangles, it's a little bit different. We'll do the same thing, go to Cleanup. This time, instead of choosing n-gons, we'll choose four-sided faces and hit Clean Up. And basically that's going to select everything but n-gons and triangles. So now to get our n-gons and triangles, I can just Shift, drag across our entire model, and then if I frame up, you can see that it's actually not framing in on them because we have the n-gon selected. So I can deselect the n-gon, and now it shows me exactly where all of those triangles are. Okay, so Cleanup is a good option for being able to see where your triangles are and see where your n-gons are. So to clean up n-gons, there are a number of ways that we can do this. Now here at the base of this sphere, it's fairly straightforward to do. We can go in with our Split Polygon tool, which is a nice tool for manually changing up topology, and we can start to connect across here. And so what I'll typically do is start by creating the beginnings of a pole here, but instead of connecting everything down to this single point, we can take this and come across this line and over here. And we'll do the same thing over here on this side. And you can see just by creating these 3 lines, we have avoided the pole, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 quads here on the end of this sphere. Okay, so typically when you're cleaning up an n-gon, you are going to probably have to add some extra resolution. So looking at this, if we have something that looks like this on a mesh, and we've got an n-gon here, okay, so we've got something like this, you're typically going to have to add resolution in here, so or an extra edge. So if I turn off the grid here, okay, and we just kind of come in here and add this edge, you can see, okay, we've created a quad here, but we've still got a triangle right here. Okay, so we could take this edge, we could come up to our Edit Mesh, and you can see we have spin edge forward, spin edge backward. And so Control Alt left, Control Alt right, so I can spin that around to different configurations. So here I've got a quad and a triangle. Here I've got a quad and then a triangle right here. Here I've got a triangle and a quad. And so you can see the different configurations, but if you kind of drop your topology in, and then you can kind of spin those around. Okay, you can also spin it backwards. Okay. Now, looking at this, it's pretty straightforward what we need to do. We need to bring this edge and continue it on. So typically you'll be taking a point of your n-gon, extending it down to the base, okay, the opposite edge. Okay, so taking a point, going to the opposite edge and creating a new point there. And so taking this point, you can see it makes sense because we just deleted it, but taking that point to the base, or to the middle of the edge that's opposite that point, and then you'll have to continue it on from there. Okay, and that will help you clean up and split that n-gon into two quads. Okay, taking one of the points of that five-sided piece, assuming it's five-sided, and taking it down to the base. Now, if you have something that has more sides than that, so let's say it's six-sided, it becomes a little bit easier. So if you've got something like this, where you've got basically the end of a cylinder is basically six-sided, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's pretty straightforward. Okay, you can try to come in here, and if you need the topology to flow in a particular way, you need this to come around and you need this to come around, you can do that. Typically you just come straight across, just like we had with our sphere, but you can go in and spin that around till you get it in the right spot. Okay, so six-sided is going to be pretty easy. Five-sided, you'll have to come from one of the points down through the base. Okay, and you'll end up with the same geometry, but you'll have to extend that line out even further. Okay, so make sure to check out the spin edges options under Edit Mesh. That'll help you to deal with your topology if you want to kind of spin those around. I typically use the split polygon tool and just manually go in and draw them where I want them. But if you're experimenting a little bit, you can use that spin edges. Now, if you have a triangle that you're trying to get rid of, typically the way to do that would be to add a line that will terminate at one of the edges of that triangle, making it into a quad. And that'll make something that we'll talk about a little bit later, a kite. And so if I go ahead and just take a line up to the base of this triangle and stop right there, then you can see technically I do have a quad, although it's more of a kite shape here. Okay. And so you can see that there is technically 1, 2, 3, 4 sides on this particular polygon. The problem is I now have to route this down somewhere and find a home for all of that, all of those lines. Okay. So oftentimes, you'll have a couple of triangles on a mesh if it's complex, and you may spend hours chasing that triangle around your mesh. You've eliminated it here, but now you've created it somewhere else. And so oftentimes it's better just to even leave it. You can always just kind of move it up into a location that is a little bit less conspicuous. If you're working on a character, maybe behind the ear or something like that, you can move it into areas. Now, a lot of times you'll be able to get rid of them, but sometimes it's not worth the time and the money that's put into moving that triangle around if you can just move it and put it somewhere out of the way. Again, all depends on your particular workflow. Just kind of going over some of the issues that we found on the forums and elsewhere of students having issues with working with triangles and also n-gons. Okay, so that's a little bit about cleaning up, also looking for our triangles and n-gons and then kind of cleaning them up a little bit. In the next lesson, we'll take a look at issues that can arise from trying to combine a piece of geometry that's very high res with a piece that is lower res and how we can do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about kites. So we'll go ahead and do that next.